Welcome to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast. You're in the right place if you're a growth-seeking being who acknowledges the challenges and delights of your humanity on the path to an ever more conscious life. If you want to feel inspired to love and accept yourself, to feel free to be and express you in all your brilliance, if you want to truly value yourself and others and feel energized and alive both at home and in the world, then sit back and take a breath as you explore and grow the brilliance of your beautiful human self with your host, the father of non-personal awareness and creator of the NPA process, Joel Young.
Hello, and welcome to episode 19 of the Be a Brilliant Human podcast with me, Joel Young. And welcome if you've just found us. You are so welcome here. I'm really glad that you've decided to tune in and give us a chance. I hope you stick around. And those many regulars who I know who you are, or actually I don't know who all of you are. That's not the nature of podcast analytics. But I know some of you because you do talk to me. Thank you for being here. Thank you for coming back again and again to listen to my pontifications. If you haven't already subscribed, do go ahead and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. Hit that button and you'll get notifications of when each episode's come out, which generally is on a Tuesday at some point during the day. I aim for 8 o'clock, but there's a lot to do, so it doesn't always go out like today, for example. It's definitely after 8 o'clock. But there we go. And I always love to get your feedback, so you can hit me up on social media at Joel Young NPA on most places. And you can always find the show notes and lots of other show notes for different podcasts at beabrillianthuman.com. This episode is 19, so you just have to put beabrillianthuman.com/19, and that will get you to the show notes for this episode. Now, you find me in rather a celebratory mode today, because tomorrow it is MPA's birthday. Now, if you're new or somehow you haven't heard about that and why I'm about MPA or the interested father of MPA, NPA stands for non-personal awareness, and the NPA process, which most people know it for, which is a simple way to stop taking things personally, popped out of me 13 years ago tomorrow in a coffee shop in Abingdon in Oxfordshire in the UK, for those international amongst you. And it's been a whirlwind, 13 years. Oh my God. I've traveled the world. Spoken to thousands and thousands of people, and there are people all over the world using the NPA process, and it's such a great privilege to be, as I call myself, the father or the custodian of NPA. And it's interesting because that's one of the things that got me interested in today's, or thinking about today's topic, being the father of NPA. And with NPA turning 13 tomorrow, I thought, oh my God, it's a teenager. Unlike most parents, when your child or children turn it to 13 and hit the teenage phase, you're like, this could go a number of ways, and there's some trepidation. So we're going to be looking at the inner teenager today. And just to let you know that also part of the celebrations for the birthday, I am doing something a bit crazy tomorrow. Actually, tomorrow and for the next 3 days, I am offering the NPA Advanced training, which has not been launched yet, but I'm opening it for beta testers at a ridiculous price for 3 days as part of the celebration of NPA's birthday. If you stick around to the end, I'll tell you more about that. All right, so the inner teenager. I mean, yeah, think about it, right? Probably you've done a fair bit of inner child work, or at least have heard of it if you're listening to this show. And I thought, what about the inner teenager? I mean, in a sense, it's kind of an inner child, but is it? Because teenagers are not really a child, not really an adult, depending on where they are in their teenagerness. But it's an interesting time, and it sort of represents that sort of the traits of teenagerness, if you like. And that time represents a point that we can hit. We all have a teenage moment, even when we're, as I am, 51 at this point, still occasionally hit those teenage moments. So today I thought I'd look at, what are the challenges and the gifts of that inner teenager, which is alive inside of all of us. And how can we look at them usefully and practically in terms of sort of handling and dealing with and making the best of that inner teenager, which is why I called this episode How to Get the Best from Your Inner Teenager. So let's jump right into that now. Okay, so when you think about sort of dealing with your inner teenager, that sort of those teenage moments, if you like, it's good to sort of ponder, what are the sort of aspects that are unique or symbolic, not the word symbolic, what are the things that sort of define that teenage part of us or the teenage era? So a little think about that, and I've come up with three main areas. The first one is individuation. Now, individuation is really what's happening at this phase of life. You're becoming independent of your parents. It's also a polite way of saying rebellion, that rebellious teenager, because at that point in life, you're wanting to become something new, something independent, a person. You want to become the adult who is independent of the sort of the nest, really. And it is about sort of that preparation for flying the nest. And one of the things that's interesting about that aspect is that teenagers tend to seek out or make more important the opinions and company of their peers. They hang out with their friends, and their friends' opinions become what's important. And I think that sort of goes back to sort of the generational thing of coming into the generational identity. But certainly in terms of sort of stepping into your own personal identity, it is about sort of getting out of what's been and into something which is independent and new. So part of that, and where the rebellion comes from, is that really that stage of really questioning what's been accepted as normal. So if you're part of a family and the family dynamics, a teenager is going to start questioning, the parents in particular, but the whole family dynamic as they search for something that is uniquely them. So individuation and rebellion is the first one. The second thing is just it's the phase where you're hitting and going through and developing in puberty. So there's a story I heard. I don't know where it comes from. I can't cite the reference, but it talked about puberty in terms of closing the 1,000 eyes. So the 1,000 eyes are a description of the third eye, which is 1,000 eyes, and I guess wherever I heard this from, that thing in the middle of the forehead where you get your intuition. And the description talked about how for that period, the 1,000 eyes close, and then as you come into maturity and adulthood, they open again, but in a new way. So in a sense, we see that in teenagers with the, if you're in the UK, you'll understand Kevin and Perry, which is a sort of a comedy program where they really sort of stereotypically sort of hit on that teenage, grumpy, shut down, sort of zombie-like state, I hate you, everything's rubbish, that kind of thing. But in a sense, that points to the puberty being like a chrysalis stage. And in a sense, it's important because sometimes you have to sort of cut off from the old to be able to sort of come back and see things anew. So that's part of it. The other thing with puberty, which is interesting, is it's a developmental stage. In fact, all of the teenage stuff is a developmental stage, and it's good to think about it in those terms. That it's a phase from childhood through that change and then into adulthood. So whenever you're meeting some inner teenage moment, you can know that what's happening is in relation to whatever's going on. Some part of you is seeking to come into adulthood or greater maturity in relation to what's going on. So in terms of the sort of sexual maturation that happens, the qualities that I thought were important here in terms of our inner teenager is that's often surrounded by a sense of shame or secrecy, but really in the positive sense, that's about ownership. So as sort of that sort of sexuality comes to light, there's the positive side is there's a natural want to sort of keep that to yourself and explore it and get to know it for you, rather than just sort of sharing it out there, which maybe comes later in teenage, depending on the developmental state and the years. But the sort of sense of potential shame or certainly secrecy and absolutely the sense of ownership is important. And also, of course, there's physical changes. So things like body image can come into play in terms of literal teenageness. In terms of your inner teenager, there's going to be changes which may not be physical, but it can be manifest in terms of physical changes, in terms of the form, the stuff that's around you. So relationships, household, it's sort of that wanting to change the stuff around you. And in terms of body image, and that goes back to being more self-conscious about who you're showing up as. So the third one is, or the third aspect of that teenagerness, I love putting ness on the end of things, is looking for independence and empowerment. So again, I was once told when I was working, I don't work with kids anymore, but I used to work with kids quite a bit. And one of the things when I was learning about working with children, and certainly with teenagers in particular, I was encouraged to, in facilitation, is to give them a job. So if I was working with someone, I'd get them to give me advice, get them to sort of have some sense of their own power and their own wisdom and those kind of things. And I think that's an important part of that teenage phase, is that sense of they're looking for that empowerment, because it's all part of the bigger picture of coming into their own adulthood. The other thing about it is in that independence and empowerment, giving them a job, getting them to do stuff, is the gift of innocence. So in a sense, they have a lack of experience, but a willingness. But a lack of experience, which is it could be seen as a negative way to frame it, is actually freedom from limitations. I learned this really well. So in case you don't know, I've been a musician and write songs and music, and have done since I was 8 years old. And back in about 2003, I was recording a solo album called Discover Me. And while I was doing that, I'd just gone through a divorce, and I was living with my dad's, and I was in his basement, and he bought some studio equipment. God bless him. But part of that routine was I was going up and down to see my daughter, a long journey to do that. At that point in the whole scheme of things, it was a bit gnarly. So I was driving back and started listening to Dave Pearce's anthems on a Sunday night, which was dance music. And I'd never really been into dance music. But because of the stuff I was writing my music with, I started wanting to write dance music. Now, here's where the innocence come in, because I had no idea. I didn't know my garage from my drum and bass. I didn't know my house from my grunge stuff. It's like I didn't know all the forms and the patterns that you were supposed to do if you were trying to fit into a genre. But this was a really good thing, because I didn't have any rules. So as I started writing music, I was basically mixing, again, like hip hop beats with drum and bass beats, and mixing it together just to create my own thing. And some of that dance music I'm very proud of. And it doesn't necessarily fit a genre, but it's very much me. So that teenage phase is a chance where, the teenagers don't have the rules, don't have the experience. So it's good to, in a sense, to give them rein to go and discover who they are through that. And the final bit in independence and empowerment is the need for some kind of mentor or inspiration or role model. So teenagers, I don't know if you've noticed this, but they'll often seek someone. I mean, I've kind of played that role with my nephews and nieces, who look to their uncle, who's a bit different from the rest of the family, and sort of seek advice and those kind of things. But I think it's important that they want some kind of positive adult role model. And I know as a parent you think it should be me, but it won't be you, because the chances are that you're exactly what they're trying to react against or step away from, in order to become themselves. So it's a fascinating part of it. So it all comes into play in terms of how we look at our inner teenager. So the other question I had to ask was, how do you know when your inner teenager is being triggered, we could say, or at play? So, I mean, like a classic thing is midlife crisis. I think of a midlife crisis as a teenage phase, really, because again, you're going from that sort of from the younger part of your life into the later part of your life. So there's that transition and becoming someone else. So that's kind of an obvious one. but I think you can find it. It's wherever there's a situation where you find yourself starting to rebel against the status quo, which in a way that's kind of you've outgrown something which has been established for some time. So anytime that is going on in your life, chances are you're going to be bumping into the teenager archetype, because these same patterns are happening, and that's how we can learn from what's great for teenagers and how we can apply it into our lives. And also watch out for falling into the teenage trap of just doing the teenage hissy fit, although of course we're all going to do that at some point, however brilliant a human we are. So there's some, like, I thought some examples really of what it might be. So a job is a good example. So maybe you've been in your role at work for several years, maybe many years, and you're starting to feel, so you start to notice you feel agitated and frustrated, or maybe it shows up as being listless or bored. Maybe you even notice yourself becoming, a bit rebellious, or it might be an internal thing. You might be inner complaining happening, or you might be openly challenging the line manager where you didn't before. So maybe you notice yourself looking around the company for someone who makes more sense to you, perhaps someone more senior. So if you're sort of thinking of staying in the company, but you might start to notice people that are further up the chain and think that they seem pretty cluey within the context of the company, again, which reflects that sort of mentorship that the teenage phase looks for. Or maybe even start looking out at the job market in general. Chances are you're hitting a teenage phase in your job. It can also happen like with a relationship dynamic. So maybe there's a dynamic in the relationship that's, it's worked well, or worked well for many years, but then it starts to sort of not work so well. So, perhaps you've got through those disagreements in a certain way. Again, it works. It's worked back then, but it's not working so well. So you start to feel that, again, that agitation or dissatisfaction with the pattern. You ask yourself, is this who I want to be? Is there more to me? Is there more to the relationship than this? Or maybe you got exposed to some new ideas that sort of triggered that off, and they've made you think, is there another way that feels more like me now? And an example of that, and I'm using this example because I know the territory inside out, is maybe you've had poor boundaries. You've tended to capitulate. That's how you've dealt with disagreements in the past. And while it may have worked, it's just not working for you anymore. And maybe you've heard about Boundary Bootcamp, the thing that I offer, and something you've read that I've written about boundaries, or from anywhere else. It sort of gives you that sense that maybe there's a possibility or a need to shift in that area. Now, initially, that's going to feel quite threatening, or it might feel quite threatening. So you might back out on the idea of changing, but maybe you notice you get more passive aggressiveness appearing, or less sort of healthy behaviors show up. You're just showing that frustration with that old status quo. Or maybe you start to push the boundaries, of how you handle these situations, which can, be quite confusing for your partner, and they can push back. And again, things can escalate in that way. These are all kind of symptomatic that you're hitting a teenage phase in relation to the dynamic of that relationship, or in that example, in relation to sort of having boundaries as they were, to having boundaries as they could be, as you get that sense of that. Another area I thought about is social habits. I mean, maybe you sort of have met regularly with a friend group. You have done that for years, and there's kind of a set pattern about it. Sort of there's set roles for each person. Each person plays a different one in the group, and it's all kind of worked very well for a while, but then there's something itching at you. Like you're feeling less and less comfortable playing that role within that group. And so questions arise, again, who do you want to be? Is this it? And again, sort of symptoms might be that you know yourself making, I don't know, a few sort of snipey comments, or questioning what a friend in the group does, how you meet, or whatever the old paradigm or the old dynamic is. And maybe when you do that, you find it's met with less enthusiasm than you hoped for, or even actively put down. And that's when the rebellion starts to stir inside. So these are some examples. And then the next question is, because I do love to get practical, is, so what to do about it? So we'll talk about that now. Okay, so I've described sort of some areas where you can notice the symptoms of you sort of bumping up against or invoking that archetype of the inner teenager. So again, the question is what to do about it. Well, the first thing I want to say to you is to think in terms of transitions. In a sense, that part of you into relation to the situation is seeking maturity. Again, it's like any teenager, no longer a child and yet not yet an adult. And it can be really helpful to identify in the inner workings of, what is the parent energy? In other words, what is the energy that this part grew up in? So that just takes a bit of inquiry to figure out what it is that's going on. Now, the parent will likely be the gatekeeper or the controller, and has the potential to be a positive role in the transformation, but also you have to watch out for that sense of the status quo generally tends to want to hang on to the status quo. So if you can find a way to work with both the inner parent and the inner teenager, that can help to sort of really make a healthier transition. I mean, in essence, the parent really needs to let go. I think we all as parents have a hard time with that. Well, that's a gross generalization. I'm sure some people find it dead easy. Yep, off you go. But just to let the teenager explore and make their own mistakes, and the parental concern generally is that, the world's going to come to the end, that they're going to go off and they'll die and, terrible stuff will happen, or they'll ruin their lives, or we'll lose them, and this is highly unlikely. I mean, it really is unlikely. In most cases, kids, they go off, they do their thing. Yeah, they have their rough and tumbles of life, but they're generally okay for the most part. So, it's good if within the inner self to encourage that sort of parental part to sort of let go, because this other part of you wants to grow into its maturity in relation to the situation. So I sort of thought about an example, and in terms of what I want to work you through this, I'm going to use the relationship dynamic I talked about. So to sort of give an example of how you might use these insights to work through. So in the example, I use example of a relationship dynamic where maybe you've been capitulating on your boundaries, and that's worked because it's just worked for the status quo, but now you've got agitation and you want to change it. So you want to shift to stronger boundaries. Now, the chances are the first thing that's going to happen is that inner parent is going to be scared to upset the status quo, and it's not going to like your rebellion. So we find there's that inner resistance comes in, and it's going to tell you scary stories of the consequences of your actions. If you start sticking up for yourself, you'll be rejected. The relationship will end. So, and the thing is, if we allow that inner parent to sort of that status quo to sort of to control us, we're going to get an outer reflection of that because it's not going to be congruent in us. So if you're with your partner and you've got that sense of guilt, if you like, for standing on your own 2 feet, chances are his response is going to reflect your inner response, and it's going to be a rockier path on it. So if we look sort of with awareness through the eyes of the positive aspects of those 3 aspects, individuation, puberty, and independent empowerment, we can get an insight into how we can sort of really help ourselves here. So with individuation, the first thing is to realize that it's a normal and passing process. So if you're looking at facing and going through changing your boundaries, you can notice it's a developmental stage in you and in the relationship. So it's being called for by the whole system. In teenage years, they can be a little hairy for sure. But as I said, that they rarely break the family. In fact, the teenager grows through it. The family adjusts, and a healthy adult to adult relationship can develop, and it will be okay. So most of our fears are normally unfounded. It's good to look at it through the eyes of it being a transitional and passing and developmental stage. And also questioning what's been normal is a natural part of this phase. So again, know that if you're starting to question the structures that you set up, the dynamics, the agreements that you've had in these situations, it's a normal part of maturation. It's a normal part of growth. So I'm just saying it's okay to question. If you look at individuation and that part about peer group influence, that's why we find it's sort of almost a natural thing in these situations. And I certainly encourage it is to find people who are in a similar situation, to sort of help you go from that to a new, more aligned you, really. And again, I acknowledge that part of the Boundary Bootcamp is that we have the Facebook group, and that's where everyone's going through the same thing at the same time. So we're all learning together, and we're all looking to improve our boundaries. So it's a healthy part of the transition process. So if you find yourself seeking out or resonating with people that are going through the same thing, that's part of that very teenage transformational journey into greater maturation. And I think that would be the action step that I offer you in relation to individuation, is find people in a similar situation and use them for support. Now, if we look at puberty, the sort of puberty aspect in this situation, so again, like a chrysalis, it's good to acknowledge that, much is changing, in quotes, in the dark, and with a sense of being out of control, really, or out of your control. Everything can go a bit gooey and unformed for a while. So, acknowledging that as you go through this change, you won't have all the answers for the people or for yourself right away. And again, that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's to be expected, so you can give yourself a break. So again, as you go through, if in this example with going through a change of coming into healthier boundaries and you're in a relationship where you've had rubbish boundaries, you're not going to have all the answers right away. Most of it in the beginning is more sense, feeling, or even that irritation or that agitation, which is, again, like being in the chrysalis. And also from that puberty part of it, it's, being self-conscious about the changes is again a perfectly normal part of that process. I mean, perhaps not the physical ones like actual puberty, but they're, maybe things are growing and showing, and it triggers a sense of privacy or even shame. After all, they're not, these are kind of intimate things. So in terms of boundaries, it's like the things that are growing are showing are things like you're becoming not tolerant of your own capitulation. But then you can start to feel like there's a sense of privacy because you're starting to explore that. And maybe you want to take time to explore it more for yourself before you take it out. I mean, the classic thing with teenage girls, actual teenage girls and pop stars. So often teenage girls, certainly when I was growing up, I don't know if it's so true anymore. I think it's more YouTube stars and things. But often the teenage girls will have a crush on a pop star. And the great gift of that, and what it is expressing a very natural thing, certainly in the feminine, is that sort of sense of sexual fantasy. So they can play with the romance and the idea of the sexiness of Justin Bieber or whoever the hell he is. But they can play without the risk of it actually going there, because they're not ready. And in a sense, again, Boundary Bootcamp offers that in the form of, the course itself as a chance to go there without necessarily immediately, before you're ready, taking that sense of needing to sort of stand your ground more before you're ready. And I make a really big deal in that course about inner rehearsal before you take your new boundaries out into the world. And again, my encouragement here to you would be to find safe ways to play out or practice those new approaches. So whatever your teenager is sort of drawing you towards, it's great to find ways to sort of play them out, maybe even if it's just in your mind, in ways that you can practice them. So in this example with the boundaries, it's to start practicing boundaries in a super safe and easy ways. And always, as I've said many times on many episodes, small moves and baby steps are your friend. All right, so the third aspect, and we'll look through the same example here, is that independent empowerment. So again, I talked about the benefit of giving teenagers a job, because it's important for them, teenagers start getting a sense of their responsibility as they move into adulthood. So it's good to give yourself a task. But again, just like with teenagers, don't let that inner parent take control. Have the inner parent hand it over to the inner teenager with that gift of innocence. So this would look like giving yourself, when you might start exploring some new aspect that's coming through, you might try and have that inner parent trying to control it with the old paradigm and using the old rules. That's going to interrupt the process. If you really want to hand it over to your teenager, throw the rules out and explore the possibilities without limitation and be playful. Again, teenagers go out and party and they find out so many things about themselves, about relationships, about life, often just by having a lot of fun. And the other aspect of independent empowerment was the mentorship. And this is where kind of research comes in. So again, in Boundary Bootcamp, it's built in with a mentor, with yours truly. And again, I make a good mentor in that situation because I've already walked the path, but I'm not part of the, in quotes, family dynamic. And I'm sharing a new way, which feels aligned with what you want to become. So the role is fulfilled. But whether it's me in that case or someone else, it's important to seek out a role model. And again, there's so many ways now to do that. So again, I'm using this example of working with trying to improve your boundaries here, because it's a very distinct example. But whatever your teenager is pushing up against, whatever's looking to change, there will be ways you can apply all of these things. You can find a role model and someone that has already sort of been on that journey and can help guide you as you go on that journey yourself, and someone who is outside of whatever that dynamic is that is there. All right, then, let's do the roundup. Okay, let's give you some takeaway bullet points from this episode then. So first up, there are many areas of life where we hit that teenage phase. And then it's good to learn from and apply the best aspects of that stage of the journey. It's also important to acknowledge it as a signal for transition and growth. So in a way, rebellion becomes the hero's journey. It's also important to find peers that are on the same journey, and also to not expect yourself to have all the answers in the middle of that process. Just trust the impulse to move forward. Then it's important to respect your need to take time to explore the newness that's emerging before you thrust it out into the world. And practice handing the reins over to that inner teenager. Trust the innocence of that part of you and the gift of its ability to explore without the rules and limitations, that are the hallmark of that old status quo. And finally, seek out mentors that are where you want to be, that have been through this journey themselves, and be open to guidance from them. They can't do it for you, but they know the territory and they can offer sound advice. So there's your little summary of it. Of course, you can find the show notes at beabrillianthuman.com/19. I've written those notes out so you can see them there. Always good to get that. And for now, that's a wrap for making the best of your teenager. But I will say to you, do stick around, because I want to tell you about the offer. I told you it's NPA's 13th birthday tomorrow. And so I've got a really special offer that I want to tell you about. And I do like to give you fair warning when I'm about to tell you about an offer. But here goes. I tell you, I'm super excited about it because I've been wanting to do this for quite a while. I've created this product called the NPA Advanced Training. Now, if you don't know, I have had available to people for quite a while now the NPA Basic Training, which teaches you the basics of how to do the process. And I'd say that it's important, if you're going to go for the advanced training, that you've had some kind of training. Now, over the years, there's lots of ways that I've offered that level of training to people. And so if you've had any kind of training, you'll definitely be able to use the advanced training. Plus, also, if you do decide to go ahead and have a look at this offer, when you click the button to buy it, you'll get a chance to actually buy the basic training at a very reduced price, so you can get them both together if you want. So what is it all about? Well, the advanced training really goes into sort of the deeper aspects of the NPA process. And the way I'm launching it this time, or for these next 3 days, it starts 9 a.m. tomorrow. The cart opens and it's going to close, hard close at midnight on Friday. And it's a course which goes in depth. So there's several modules in it. First of all, we cover the philosophies of NPA. Now, I do talk about the philosophies of NPA a lot on this show, but this is a really crafted, distinct way to go through all the very distinct philosophies. Now, these philosophies, they relate to the process, but they're fantastic philosophies for life. And so I think in itself, just that philosophy module is an incredibly powerful, life-shifting, really kind of succinct, sock it to you, get the core sense of the non-personal philosophies in that module. And then we go on to the second module is about, I called it the NPA facilitation cycle. Now, this is one of the most exciting parts for me. So as you know, I've been doing one-to-ones with people for, about 20 years now, at least, I should think. I can't think of the numbers offhand. Since 1995. It's a long time. But within the second module, again, it relates to the NPA process because it's how I work with NPA. There are different parts to it. Again, you can download for free the 6 simple lines, but to get how to work with somebody else specifically in a way which is super graceful, and I really map out the entire facilitation cycle. Now, if you're a coach or a therapist or someone who uses these kind of tools with other people, this is going to be such amazing value, because whether you use it with NPA, the way that I approach these things can absolutely be applied to so many other tools and techniques. So this module, especially if you're a coach, is something that can really, really add value to your whole practice. Now, obviously, I'm going to get the question of, well, I'm not a coach, I haven't got clients, so what's the point of that? Well, the point of it is that even if you don't, work with clients, there's literally thousands of people all over the world who've had training in NPA and not for a second think about being a coach or a therapist or working one-to-one with people. But they recognize that the way you approach facilitation with NPA with another person is in a sense, those factors, those things that I'm sharing with you are really important, again, in how you approach facilitation with yourself. And that same thing applies, whether it's with NPA or other things. There are profound teachings in there about how to really open into that non-personal space with whatever self-inquiry work, whatever tools you're using. All right, the third module is I call it the the NPA technical. It's really for those potential NPA geeks. But again, it's always like, yes, it's for the potential NPA geeks, but it's also very much, for anyone who's interested in what's under the bonnet of NPA. Those 6 simple lines, why is that there? Why is this here? So as I go through the process line by line, really sort of laying out what the intentionality, what the function of each of the words and the lines are. And again, within that is threaded understandings and teachings of how we work and how we tick as brilliant humans. That's module 4. Did I go through 4, 3, 4? I think I've missed one. No, I haven't missed one. Yes, philosophies. See, I'm not on script, am I? I said this last time. Facilitation cycle, advanced technical, yes. And then we go on to module 5, which is the who, what, where, when. Now, I know what I missed. I missed the programs. See, I'm in my head. So the 4th one is actually programs. This is very important. So the NPA programs, I haven't taught those in the basic training. The programs really came about from my own experience with many different processes, where you do a process and you have what they call the skin tan effect, and it would go away. And I decided to sort of figure out how I could address that with NPA, just in case it came along. And the way that you use programs is where there is something which is either so embedded within you that it seems impossible to change, but it feels like it needs training over time in order to shift it. Now, many, many times, a single NPA process can do amazing things, but there are times when there are programs or using NPA over time in a certain way can help you shift it. I mean, the first time I ever did a program, I was 16.5 stone, and within 12 days, I shifted everything in relation to food, such that, within a very short space of time, I'd lost 3.5 stone, and I haven't looked back since. That was the dramatic power of the program. And there's 2 kinds of program. One really is for when you're looking at bringing something in positive, and one is for when you're looking at letting go of something and letting something in. And I go into depth in the advanced training course about how to do those. Right, which brings us to module 5, which is the who, what, where, when. Now, I've said to you that I'm launching this as a beta offer. So it's going to be a very low price, and you're getting in while the thing is still being built. Now, everything that I've described so far is there, ready to go, and it's all the core training. But I wanted a section which really addressed the specifics of situations. How to use NPA here, how to use it there, if there are specific situations coming up. Now, I have my ideas, but what will be great for the beta testers as they come in, well, as you come in, if you come in as a beta tester, is first of all, well, of course, you'll be able to give me lots of feedback on the program already so I can make it better and better and better. But specifically with that section, I'll be looking for, what do you want to know? Where are the situations you're asking those questions? How do I use NPA in this situation? How do I use NPA in that situation? What happens if this comes up? What happens if that comes up? So that's a section that I've left open, and together with the beta testers. So if you come in to be part of this, you can help shape it. So it will be perfect for you because you're doing that, but also it will make a great module, a great sort of rounding off of the whole of that advanced training. So if you're interested in NPA, if you've got a bit of training in NPA already, then I really strongly recommend that you get on the case now. This is only going to be open for 3 days. Now, the course itself, when it's launched fully, is going to go out for £297. I'm knocking £200 off of that, so it will be just £97 in the next 3 days only. And in that time, I'd love to get, a bunch of you in there so we can explore and play. Of course, you get the benefit. Once you're in, you're in. If you have questions about, what if I don't know, do I get a money back guarantee? I always offer a 30-day money back no-cobble guarantee. So there's actually no risk to do it. So if you're curious about it, make sure that you go ahead and get involved. Now, it goes live tomorrow, as I say, at 9. It's now, as I'm recording this, Tuesday late afternoon. So 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 5th. And you can find it. There'll be, if you go to the show notes for this, which is beabrillianthuman.com/19, there'll be a link there to go and get it. And you'll be able to find it around the site. The distinct URL for it is very, very long. I'm not making this an easy one. If you're keen, I want you to go and find it, because this is an insane offer to do this massive, wonderful, amazing, potentially life-changing course for just £97. So make sure you go to the show notes, beabrillianthuman.com/19, click that link. Also, if you're on social media next 3 days, I'm going to be on there like a rash. Because I really want to give the most people possible the chance to take this opportunity and go for it. All right, so that's what I got for you. Make sure if you're interested at all, just go and check out the link on that page. Otherwise, thanks so much for being here as ever. I hope this pontification on making the best of your teenage self has been fun. And do wish NPA a happy birthday tomorrow. It's kind of a big deal for me. It may sound silly, but I am the father of NPA, and 13 years feels like a long time and a short time. And as ever, if you want that guide, then, I talked about boundaries again today, so I'll drop the link in there for Boundary Bootcamp. Again, it's not open yet. I only open it once a year, and it's not that far away, but you can sign up for the wait list. That is always on the beabrillianthuman.com website if you'd like me to notify you when that's coming up. And of course, you can always investigate having some one-to-one time with me. If you want that one-on-one guidance through any teenage process, then it's joelyoungnpa.com/sessions. Otherwise, remember to subscribe, leave a review, send me a message, and have a lovely, lovely rest of this week. And all that remains to say, as I love to say, cue the moo.